Welcome back. Last week on the show, we had State Senator Joe Gruters, who is the chair of the Republican Party of Florida. This week, I invited Manny Diaz, who earlier this year took over as the Florida Democratic Party chairman. For years, the state party has been a complete and utter disaster. As Gruters told me last week, Republicans have been kicking their butts. So why does Manny Diaz think that will change?
Jim, it's a long-term problem, which explains our results over the past 20 years. It's systemic. I like to use the carnival analogy. Carnival comes into town, they pitch the tents, they built the kids' animal farms and do all those things. And then as soon as the carnival's over, they break it down and leave. And so particularly, for example, in off years, like we're in one now, we've taken a beating in many respects, while the Republicans haven't stopped, to their credit.
When President Obama was the president of the United States and was winning Florida, Democrats had a 700,000 voter registration advantage. That's gone now. You're basically in a dead heat now with Republicans. And a lot of that is because Republicans have done the groundwork, the blocking and tackling, so to speak, of trying to get the machinery of their party moving. Why hasn't that happened, and how long will that take you to fix?
Look, it's twofold. And number one, I'm not going to excuse what happened in the past. I mean, clearly that was disastrous. But what we're doing now and what we have started is we've geared up. We're building up a statewide organization that is going to be working year-round. It's going to be working statewide, and it's going to be partisan. We're not relying on C3s or C4s or IEs or all these other groups to do our work. This is work, as you described, that the Democratic Party should be doing. So we're not going to build up field operations, like I said, just around elections. We're not going to focus on getting the blue counties to get us over the top. We're not going to do what's been done for the last 10, 20 years. We're going to change all that. So I'm confident that we're going to build an army that our candidates will have. Remember, one of the other challenges that we have is that our primaries are in August. And if you remember the Andrew Gillum case, he practically came out of nowhere, got the nomination, and then all of a sudden you're expected to build a statewide field operation in a state like Florida with huge media markets over a course of 2 months. By the time that money comes in, quite frankly, it's too late. And yet, despite all that, Andrew lost by 30,000 votes to Ron DeSantis.
You know, it's interesting you bring up Andrew Gillum. His personal problems are well documented after it. I don't want to talk about that. But I look at the comparison because a lot was made back in 2018 of sort of comparing him to Stacey Abrams, the two candidates who were running for governor who sort of came up and moved forward. And I look at Georgia as a really good example of what went right for Democrats versus in Florida what went wrong. Stacey Abrams, going into her 2018 governor's race, had worked for 2 years to build up that very type of organization you talk about. She lost in 2018, but as soon as she lost, she started immediately going back and registering voters and continuing that work even after losing. And in 2020, you saw 2 Democratic senators elected in Georgia, and now in 2022, the expectation is she'll run, and she very well may then win the governor's race in Georgia. And that tells you that nothing happens in a single cycle. It takes time. So how far behind is Florida? And when can you realistically think that you can put up a statewide candidate, that can honestly challenge a Republican machine in the state?
Well, first of all, I've talked to Stacey a number of times, and because obviously you like to plagiarize and look at best practices for others. And she's the first one to tell you it took longer than 2 years. It took closer to 10 years. We are not Georgia, however. We don't have, if you look at our record over the years, with the notable exception last year, we were called the 1% state. All of our elections, if you go back to 1992, I think, there's never been a winning election, Democrat or Republican, that with more than, I think it was, on average, it was about 200,000 to 225,000 votes. That's not an insurmountable number. I mean, so our numbers are there, our demographic is there. We just haven't done the work, Jim. And so,
but wait, let me just hold you there, because you eliminate 2020, and that's what this next election cycle, 2022 and certainly 2024, is going to show. Was 2020 an aberration, or was it a demarcation line where that now means Florida is a red state? Because Donald Trump did something in the state of Florida that, he won by, what was it, 3.5 points? You talk about previous elections being very close. He seemed to develop a playbook and a style that others are going to copy and run on here in the state of Florida. And more importantly, I think that there has been an influx of people coming into Florida from New York, from the Northeast, from other parts of the country, who like what is going on in Florida from a Republican standpoint. And I think that a lot of those new people who are coming down here are coming here to vote Republican. So obviously you don't believe that is a harbinger of things to come. So tell me why you think you're right.
Well, I'll give you one perfect example. During that same period of time where Democrats have not done well, we adopted every 2 years from 2010 to 2020, most recent, the last year, where we adopted a minimum wage. So we've adopted minimum wage, felon voter restoration rights, medical marijuana. We beat away women's reproductive rights. We passed an environmental water conservation bill. We passed fair districts. Those are all Democratic issues that we fought for, that they opposed. And we won each and every one of those by over 60%, because as you know, we need 60% to get an amendment approved here statewide. So while we were losing to Donald Trump by a large margin last year, the state was also approving a minimum wage hike, which they opposed. And so to me, it's really about the party. It's not about the demographics or whether.
Well, it's about the message then. Are Democrats appealing to the economic message, the economic insecurity of voters? That's what the minimum wage was really about.
We're not, and we haven't been. Our messaging has been a mess as well, just like our field operations. And by the way, that's one of the things that I intend to correct. That's how I grew up. I grew up as a grassroots organizer. And one of the things that we've done is we've given up on that. Last year was even worse because we had COVID, and the campaign made a decision to shut down. So we weren't even knocking on doors. We weren't going to shopping centers and meeting.
Was that a mistake? Do you think that was a mistake?
Oh, absolutely a mistake. Absolutely a mistake. The Republicans didn't do it. And obviously that, in my opinion, that had a lot to do with the results that we saw, at least the disparity. I don't know if, Biden would have won the state. I don't know. No, who can say, right? But do I know it affected us? Absolutely, it affected us.
Well, the Democrats also did a horrible job of counteracting the attack of socialism, communism, whatever you want to call it, either through Spanish language radio or, social media like Facebook, WhatsApp, Instagram, all those sort of tools that were being used. And I think Democrats just said to themselves, but we're not socialists. Joe Biden defeated the socialists. So how could anybody consider, the Democratic Party to be socialist? And that was a real mistake. So how do you counter that? Because I think that was a driving factor where Democrats have lost touch, lost faith with the Venezuelan community, which used to be a good Democratic vote, the inroads that was being made with the Cuban-American community, the Colombian community, the Nicaraguan community. Those notes of socialism really resonate there in a way that I don't think Democrats even locally fully understood.
No, and I think you're being kind by saying we did a bad job dealing with, because I don't think we dealt with it at all. Like you said, we sent out a press release saying we're not socialist or communist, and that's supposed to be enough. You can't do that. You have to roll up your sleeves and go mano a mano with people and point out the lies. And by the way, Jim, as a son of a former Cuban political prisoner, I am deeply offended by this constant barrage of lies that are playing up to the emotions of people in this community who have suffered plenty over the past 60 years. Because when you don't have a plan, you have to resort to scare tactics. And what I'd love to hear, by the way, I'm still waiting for the alternative to Obamacare, which, remember, they told us, 10 years ago, that no, we have a better plan. I haven't seen it. Have you?
Well, let me ask you this, because we had, as I said, Joe Gruters on the show last week. He was very confident that Ron DeSantis would be reelected by his wager was 5 points, but he would win by 5 points, which would be a blowout in the state of state of Florida, given the history, as you sort of discussed before.
Right.
Earlier, you said that it takes time, your conversations with Stacey Abrams, that it takes years to build that sort of machinery.
Right.
Realistically, can you, I mean, I don't see how you're able to mount a real campaign in 2022. Maybe the Democrats can get their act together by 2024, but 2022 seems out of reach for you when it comes to either Marco Rubio or Ron DeSantis defeating him.
Why? What is his record? I mean, let's talk about his record, because I also heard Chair Gruthers talk about, you know, their tremendous success. I remember DeSantis doing like victory laps after the session, talking about how many policy successes that they had. He wouldn't know policy if it hit him in the forehead, Jim. This is pandering, not policy, and it's pandering to that, you know, Fox audience that he believes is necessary for him to get elected. His 6 signature priorities: the anti-protest bill, the $3,000 contribution limit on issue committees, the anti-tech law, the cruise ships, the school mask mandate, even sanctuary cities, if you remember, even though we don't have one, he outlawed them, have all been thrown out by courts. And by the way, pending is the voter suppression law is still in the courts. Their strategy, his strategy has been, let me create a boogeyman, then I will slay them, and then I will proclaim victory. So you create a bunch of fake enemies in your quest to conquer in the name of freedom. That's not what is the record? I mean, they cut affordable housing in half, the affordable housing. They cut money from schools. They talk about life all the time, right? Like they own life. Well, let's talk about gun violence. There have been over 300 mass shootings this year. We are setting homicide records never before seen in America.
Next year, you know, as we start getting into the political season, I'd love to have you and the Republican Party chair, Joe Gruters, come on together and we can sort of hash through some of these things in person. Does that sound like a plan?
I'd love to. They're going to give me a lot more talking points after this session. So yeah, I'd love to.
Woo, it's going to be a good one. I look forward to having both of them on the show. We'll be right back.